So I just finished the reading for you of the synoptic apocalyptic gospels, and I wanted to get into why there are so many different opinions in Christianity. And really, the root cause of this is there's no proof of the resurrection. There's no proof that Jesus came. There's no proof of the parousia, which is what is called Jesus is coming. This started to cause a dilemma amongst religions, especially when they became organized. The Catholic Church claims attestation all the way back to Paul. And we know from history around 300 we had Constantine, and he's the one who really, as far as we know historically, the one who made the church corporate. That's where the name Christian or Christianity, that was the label it was given. The dilemma they had was they had this perfect person who didn't do what he said he was going to do. And in that, the dilemma was, well, we have this organization now, and we have people that believe us. And if they don't believe what we're telling them, it's going to make us look stupid too. Church-wise, obviously they're always thinking of themselves, being the humans they are, the power that they have. Now they're intercessors between the people and God and Christ. So what they started to do was spiritualize everything. And another thing that they did, which is basically what is called amillennialism, is they would say, okay, Jesus is still coming back, but we misinterpreted what he was saying. So in reinterpreting the Bible, they put Jesus coming. So Jesus is coming one day, and you got to be a good boy and girl, do what we say, and everything will be fine. Something along those lines. Now, when they do that, they have to control more things. There were still people in the churches that were, knowledgeable. They knew right from wrong. They knew what these people were doing was not in line with the teachings from Paul and the apostles and of Christ. But they pushed them out. Even historically, we know from records that some of the elders were banished, just like John was, on places like Patmos. I think one of them even went to Patmos, if I'm not mistaken, because he was being honest. And you can't have that in an organization. You have to do what's best for the organization. And if you don't play ball, then you're gone. Just like today with anything. So you start to get alternatives to what happened. And they have to go in there and they have to create some kind of story that makes it look like Jesus is going to come back some other time. Okay? And then also with the Catholic Church, you have something called the Vulgate, which came out a little later, but what they did was they would write it in Latin, a language few people, even back then, as from what I can understand, didn't really understand. It was just an obscure region in Italy that spoke Latin. But that way you can control all the writings. It may be even a reason, come to think of it, I had this thought before, is why we don't have any of the original manuscripts. They may have been destroyed on purpose so they couldn't read them for themselves. Because when the Greeks came over from war-torn from the eastern part, they brought all their manuscripts with them. But we just don't have them. We do have manuscripts that are that old, some of them even older, papyri manuscripts, but none of the New Testament. And it's fine because the Vulgate is actually correct. It is. But a common person couldn't read it. Just like before, even in Revelation, when we have a letter to the 7 churches, they talk about blesses those who reads and hears these words. That's not verbatim, but people couldn't read back then. But they could understand. And that's why you went to church. That's why you went to the communities where they met to hear these words and to hear these messages, because they didn't have their own Bibles and they couldn't understand. Believe it or not, when I was in Afghanistan, the same thing is still true amongst those people with their Muslim religion. They tell them all kinds of crazy things that's in the Quran, but isn't there. And they don't know any better because they can't read. But going back to what I was saying before with the Vulgate, now you had control over the word. And this went on for quite a long time. And this is where the really dark history of the Catholic Church started to take over. Persecutions, all kinds of nonsense. And obviously you're going to get that when some human being has total power. You have to understand, it doesn't matter if it's a Catholic Church or the Protestant Church, it's a mechanism, some kind of corporate entity that someone controls, just like our own government. And they could come in and do whatever they want. You can't do anything about it. And if you don't do what they tell you, then you'll be persecuted. And on top of that, you're going to go to hell for the rest of your life. So that's not a good thing. But I'll touch on this later. More to the point, these people didn't have any Bible. How did they go to heaven? Well, they had faith. Just like the people before them, going all the way back to the first days of the Mosaic era. You have to have faith in God. That's what matters. A Bible is just a book. It's a great book, but it's just a book. It's nothing without God, and it's nothing without Christ. In Aramaic, it's Talmud. You have the Talmud, which is Jewish, but then you have the Talmud, which is Aramaic for follower of the way. Not necessarily Christ, but the way Christ told us to live. So Talmud is follower of the way. And this is why it's perfect, because you have a person who can't be killed again. It's a church you can't destroy. It's a religion you can't destroy. It's a thought you can't destroy. It lasts forever. It lasts in the heart of people that believe. So you can never destroy it. You can never get rid of it. But going back to the churches, throughout time, they kept this Jesus is coming in the future story going on. And throughout time, people would get a hold of it, and they would talk about how the Pope is the Antichrist from Revelation, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you get more of the same things. You have a dilemma. You come up with some way to quell the situation, and you get even more nonsense. It's been 2,000 years since Jesus, almost. There's been a lot of time for a lot of people to put their greasy little fingers all over everything. And it's mucked it up pretty good. But again, it doesn't matter, because you have God. And you have faith in God. And you have a mechanism inside of you that's installed in everybody. Consider it a cell phone. It's built into you. And because of Christ, you can talk to God whenever you want. And no one can take that away. They could kill you, and they still can't do anything about it. It lasts forever. So that's why they have to create all these stories to get around it. They have to cast doubt on everything. They have to tell everyone it's something else. They have to create an alternative reality. Just like the name Christian. It's an alternative name. Really, you're followers of the way, or disciples of Christ is another way to say it. We have words that can define it. But Christian was the corporate name it was given. And that's what stuck. And it's not a bad thing, but it's not based on the reality of the original sayings of Christ. Do you see what I'm saying? They've kind of shifted it over to the side and created their own dimension of Christianity. But Christianity and God and Jesus are not compatible. Just like the old covenant isn't compatible with Judaism. Christ himself said many times to the Jews, to the Pharisees, doesn't your law say this? Doesn't your tradition say that? That's why Jesus was eating grain on the Sabbath. He says, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. How come your disciples don't wash their hands? These are stupid little things they've come up with that were ritualistic. Just like in our churches, we have ritualistic programs, and we do things. When we go into the church, we'll make the sign of the cross. These are just traditions that were built up over time, but they have nothing to do with Jesus or God. It's just something that we've created and followed and learned over time. Now, over time, you started getting different religions. You had Martin Luther and the Reformation. They wanted to read the Bible. But sure enough, just like everything else, humans came along and screwed it up. They turned it into a corporate machine, money, power, etc. And then you start having all these breakoffs. Baptists, this and that, and brother this and coalition that. And it's an absolute mess. Each and every one of them starting to teach their own version of what they think is in the Bible. A lot of them, back then, I'll take Calvinism for a second, they had this conception of what's in the Bible. If your baby dies, it's going to go to hell. But that's because they didn't have the whole story. They didn't understand everything. More like we do now. But even though we have all this information now, it's too much information. Which way do I go? It's very, very confusing. But back then, they only had a certain amount of information. And they still hold on to these beliefs today, because what are you going to do? Turn around and say, well, we were wrong, we're going to reorganize? You think the Catholic Church is going to reorganize? I mean, some of the things that they say about Mary being a virgin and et cetera, praying to Mary, that's not in the Bible. You're not supposed to do that. In some ways, it says you're not supposed to do that. But they're not going to stop and say, well, we've been doing it wrong, we're going to start doing it the right way from now on. No. Why? Because their credibility. They'll lose power. They'll lose money. And you can't have that. And it's not just the Catholics. It's all of them. All these religions are the same. It doesn't matter how big they are or how small they are. It's the same concept. And it's funny because people argue between this religion and that religion, or this point of view and that point of view on this or that. But guess what? They're all stupid. It's stupid to say, well, I'm a premillennialist and I believe in this, and another guy's they're having a debate with each other about, well, I'm a Calvinist and I believe this, and they start, this is why my stupid made up religion based on God and Jesus is superior. But they're both wrong, aren't they? They're both a waste of time. They have nothing to do with God or Jesus. They violate the very basic rules of the commandments that we are told to follow by Christ right off the bat. And they do it all the time. But then you get into more of their teachings. And it's very, very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. You should be able to learn just like Paul himself would teach you in the early days of the churches that he set up in what we used to call Asia, but now we call Turkey and Greece. And you should be getting the same message, but you're not. You're getting an alternative message based on their opinions and their creeds and their religion of what the Bible says and what Jesus says and what it means. And if you're confused by what they're saying and what you're reading, you should be, because reading the Bible is actually very, very simple and very straightforward. It's very easy to understand. Even myself, I know when I started reading, very confusing. Why? Because this guy is saying, oh, there's going to be a third temple. And this guy's over here saying, oh, there's going to be a resurrection. And then Jesus is going to fly around some kind of pattern and then come back 7.5 years later and kill everyone else off. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything like that. So here I am scratching my head, reading the entire Bible, which isn't easy, trying to figure out all this nonsense. And it's just not there because it's made up. Like I said, it's almost like a snowball. It started off small and it's just grown into this big, fat, twisted mess of nonsense. It's all nonsense. But the great thing is that you have the Gospels available to you now. And you can read them, just like I did in that previous video where I read them to you. That was just the NASB, which has a lot of problems with it. They all do. Every version is bad. Every single one. The Vulgate's bad. The Textus Receptus is bad. The Alexandrian texts are bad. They're all bad. Not originally, but when they get into versions of the Bible that come to us, that's when they go bad. Because they go through human hands, and they have to play by certain rules, and they produce these Bibles. When people make a Bible, they're not doing it for free. I don't care what you say or what you think. They're here to make money, especially now. When they produce a Bible, when they start printing Bibles, they need to make money. They need to at least sell their inventory. So what are they going to do? They're going to cater to the biggest audience, the broadest audience. That's where the money is. And how many Bibles do you really need? We have versions of versions of versions of Bibles, just based off of the Alexandrian and Textus Receptus manuscripts and where they derive from. So it's very convoluted. It's very confusing. But even though you have a certain type of version, that doesn't mean you cannot understand what's going on, because the version you need is God. That's the version you need. He'll be able to magically, and I will say magically, show you everything you need to know if you ask for it. If you ask for it, you'll get it. I guarantee you, because I did. I'm not a smart guy. I can't tell you how many head injuries I have, and I can understand it like a rocket scientist can understand math. It's not hard. It's actually very easy and very beautiful. And it is the most relieving story that I've ever heard in my life. And it's perfect. You hear all the time there's all these problems in the Bible and this and that. That's not. It's perfect. A lot of people can't understand it because they're not believers. They're not praying to God. They're not talking to God. They're not like you would talk to your grandparent or someone who loved you very, very much and never wanted anything from you. And you just went to him and said, hey, Dad, I'm thinking about going to college. What do you think? It's a two-way conversation. One's talking, one's listening. God doesn't respond to you, but he answers you. And he will answer you. And if you ask, he will give it to you. If you want to know what's in the Bible, ask him. But then you'll come across a lot of this confusing material that won't make sense. Don't worry about it. I mean, I've seen like the Blue Letter Bible. They cater to everyone. So you'll look up a word, and depending on what version of the Bible, you can get 5 different meanings for the same verse. 5 different conclusions just for one passage in the Bible, because they are corrupted. They'll take words like the King James did in Matthew, and they'll say, when's the end of the world? Now everyone thinks it's going to be the end of the world. I mean, look at the disaster they've caused. All this dispensational Antichrist stuff, that all stems from that. One little break off, just 1 degree over here, and it's created a complete disaster. But that's on purpose. And God knows about it. And it's fine. You don't need to worry about it. But we have become, just like our predecessors, of the first covenant, which is known as what we know as Judaism. But Judaism, it's a religion, but it doesn't really exist anymore. It's a dead religion. It doesn't have a temple. So if it doesn't have a temple, you can't practice that religion. Whereas Christians, or disciples of Christ, we have God, but we have the words of God through Christ. So we have Christ. You can't destroy it, like I said before. So you can't destroy this covenant. You can't destroy the promises. They're eternal. They talked about Moses and they said, this covenant will last forever. But again, that's a word that's been twisted. Forever doesn't mean forever in that sense. Forever just means until I get rid of it. And he did get rid of it because they violated the contract. But instead of leaving them out in the dark, he created a new covenant. He sent Christ down, created a new covenant, and it's better. It's superior. You don't know how lucky you are as a Christian to not have to do the things and follow the laws that Jews do now. It's a waste of time. It's nice, but it doesn't do anything. And they can't see for themselves Christ, the Mashiach. It's their Messiah. They've been waiting for this Messiah for over 3,000 years now. Waiting. But he came 2,000 years ago. And he was right in front of them. And not just some guy who sweeps the streets. We're talking about high priests here. High priests that they probably knew the law by like the back of their hand. And they had the Messiah right in front of them. And they couldn't see it. Christians are the same way now. They have this belief in what they think the Bible says through their church, through their parents, through their friends, through influences, through TV. And it's not even true. They're waiting for something that happened 2,000 years ago. And you can prove it. All you got to do is read the Bible. Don't believe me? Take your version of the Bible out and compare them, just like I did in that video. It's right there. The only question is, do you believe Christ? Or are you going to say, well, there's no proof, so it must mean something else? And reinterpret it. And we'll get to that later on. But you have to understand, you are a victim. All these people have been victimized. And it's just like our government. It's only a few people at the top that are in power, that continue to manipulate everyone. And we all suffer for it. As a Christian, you suffer, not in the tense that you read in the book, but you suffer because you're being put through all this. And a lot of people just say, I've had enough. Because there's nothing there. They don't feel it. And the ones that do feel it are faking it. They're doing the love bomb thing when you get to church and everyone's happy with everyone else and they get energized. That's why COVID, you couldn't shut down the churches. You'd lose everyone. The magic would go away and they would see reality. Can't have that. And there's a lot of churches, not all of them, but there's a lot of churches where that would happen, these big mega churches. They would just become despondent and they would lose their faith. But what they didn't realize is they had God there. They always had God there. So it's not a big deal. It's only a big deal to, these John MacArthur's and the people, the Austin at the big mega church. They're the ones that need you to keep coming in every week. It's just like before. Before, in the early days, you couldn't read. You didn't even have your own Bible, so you had to go down there. You needed to go down there. You wanted to go down there. But now they obscure everything, and you have to go down there. It's the same thing, but for completely different reasons. So it's not your fault. You are a victim. You are being manipulated. Churches are probably one of the most manipulated organizations on the planet. And there's a reason for that. And we'll talk more about that later. I'll tell you why, or why I think why. But don't get offended. It's not your fault. Evil is everywhere. And there's no point, if you want to destroy a nation like America, if you want to take over the country and control everything, like some of these conspiracy people say there is, it is actually true. There's always someone that wants to take advantage of you. There's always someone that wants to take advantage and dominate over you. That's just human nature. Everyone wants to climb that greasy pole up to the top. And coming into your church in an indirect way has been done, I can't even tell you, it's probably been done hundreds of years ago. Probably right off the bat. But more so now, especially in America, we have religions based off of science fiction novels. The late great Planet Earth. It's a science fiction novel. It's not real. It's not based on reality. It's based off of the Plymouth Brothers and John Nelson Darby. And you got Mormonism, you got the Seventh-day Adventist, you got the Jehovah's Witnesses that came a little later. They all came around the same time, and dispensationalism came around the same time. And that stemmed, again, from the King James Version, where it said it's going to be the end of the world. You see how that happens? You see how just one little word. And in the King James Version, you can go to Luke or Mark, and you can see it's the age. But people don't look at that. And that's what you need to pay attention to. That's why I read those chapters synoptically together. Not mashed together. I didn't harmonize them. I just put them together so you can get the full picture. Because you can be a math, you can hear one thing, you can never hear anything else. And guess what? Your pastor, your preacher, they aren't going to tell you that stuff. Because if they tell you everything, you don't need them anymore. That's why they have confusing Bibles. That's why they only tell you certain parts of things. That's why when they come in, they're, oh, I love you so much. Jesus loves you how you are, blah, 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 blah. And you feel all good about yourself. And then you take off. But then you got to come back for more. Are you a disciple of Christ if you need that? If you need to be filled up with love, physical, on earth love all the time, no wonder why you hate yourself and your life and everything else. You sit there and you figure, how come the magic doesn't work for me? And I know everyone's thinking it. I thought it myself. I've talked to a lot of people. I have friends that are on anxiety pills. They go to church all the time. They're almost elders. They're like parishioners. They're doing all kinds of stuff with the church. They've been there for years. And they're depressed. They have anxiety. You think Jesus was depressed? No. I'm not depressed. Not anymore. I'm not any better than you. The only difference between my life and your life, if it applies, I have a relationship with God. That's it. And it takes a second. It takes a second to go somewhere in private. I know that ain't always easy, but you can find time. You can sit on your ass all day and watch TV. You can pray. And if you can pray, then you have a relationship with God. And you go to Him often. I pray maybe every couple of weeks. To me, it's like a bucket that fills up. And one day I just empty it out. And then in between, I'm, oh God, why this? Why? I ask questions about studying. I talk to Him all the time, but in private. Then you can go to your church. Then you can go with all your friends and hang out with them and share a brother love and break bread. But you have to have that relationship first. You can't just go to church and expect to hear a couple words and get filled up and then go away and expect it to last, because it's not. You're just high on Jesus. You're high on Jesus. There's nothing in you. It's like taking a shower. You turn the faucet on, but nothing comes out. But with God, it's constant. Because once you repent, once you see it, you turn around and you see it, you can't unsee it. It's forever. Because you never want to go back. I'm a Christian. Why do I keep wanting to drink? And why do I keep doing all this? It's because you're fooling yourself. You don't have a relationship with God. You are a victim. But after a while, you become the perpetrator. There is a point where something happens and either you ignore it, which most people do. They just stick their heads in the ground, and that's where they keep it. I can't tell you how many, even my friends, they just stick their heads in the ground all the time. They don't address anything. They don't say, you know what, I need to take this to God. No, they want to do it themselves. Instead of asking God a question, they want to ask their friends. They come to me and ask me questions. Why don't you go talk to God? Why don't you ask him? I can't help you. I'm a human being. But they rely on me. But don't be offended. This should help you understand what's going on around you. You're being controlled and manipulated by your own government. You're being controlled and manipulated by your church and your friends and even yourself. You are your own worst enemy, and you have been brainwashed. That's a part of being human. It's going to happen. And you have to unscrew yourself all on your own with God's help. But you have to approach him. You have to have a relationship with him. That's what this is all about. The Bible isn't for some academic at a college. It's not for some blowhard at a church who says, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not for them. They think it's for them. They think heaven's for them. But it's not. And a lot of people go along with it. But they don't know any better. Because they've been lied to. And it's very unfortunate. But don't get offended. And don't worry about being a hypocrite. Be a hypocrite. Say, yeah, I'm a hypocrite. It's okay. But don't turn away from God. If you do something, don't say, oh, I'm a piece of crap and it's just not going to work out. No. Turn to God and say, I did it again. I don't really like to. But at least you're honest about it. That's what God wants. Honesty. You just go to him and you talk to him. And that's why you want to do it in private. So you can ask him anything you want. You can tell him anything you want. It's private. Because you do have to tell him everything you want. Tell him everything that's wrong with you and that what you need help with. You can't ignore problems. He already knows anyway. He just wants to see if you're going to be honest about it. That's the only thing. Now, as a Christian, when you read the Bible, you have to understand one thing. Jesus is the big dog, okay? In the military, he's the general. He's the president, okay? He trumps everybody. Paul, Daniel, Moses, I don't care who you pick out of the Bible, okay? Jesus is the big dog. And everything he says is gold. That's why you need to spend all your time in the beginning in the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Read different versions if you need to. You got computer programs now. You can look at any version you want. Make it make sense to you. I've read almost every single major version. And every time it says it a little different. And then I started to practice reading Greek in certain aspects just to clarify things. And you can almost see it when you read it. It's like There's something about that sentence. I don't know what it is. You look at it in the Greek and like, oh, no wonder why. They're at it again. Every version does that. Don't worry about it. You have God. He's taking you under his wing. You're fine. Don't stress out about it. But you have to understand that Jesus is in charge. He's the one that says what's going to happen. So if you read something else and it isn't not in line with what Christ said, it's wrong. Do you see that? That's how you can be right about everything in the Bible. And it's not knowledge. You're not here to get puffed up and go show your friends how smart you are. It's about understanding. Do you understand? It's called salvation. God is asking, do you get it? Do you understand what's being said to you? When Jesus says something, do you know what he's talking about? Or are you reading everything else in the Old Testament, which doesn't even matter anymore? Christ came, we know Christ was here, and he came to fulfill all things. So the Old Testament, gone. There's a lot of great stuff in there, but it doesn't apply. It's like the law before America. Lawyers don't go and look up new Amsterdam codes for loitering and take that to court. It doesn't apply. It's past. Different, completely different country. We're in a new covenant now. And Jesus is the boss. And whatever he says is the way it goes because it came directly from God. I'm not saying the things that the other people said didn't come from God. But he is the Messiah. He is the Christ. He is the big cheese. And what he says goes. And as long as you get to know him and you get to know what he says, you'll always be on the right side of him. And if you read something else and it doesn't jive with what Christ said, it's wrong. If someone else says something about that and you are really good at understanding what Christ said, you understand, you get it, and it's not hard. They're wrong. You see how easy that is? You know everything now. You know more than some university professor with 10 degrees. In religion, it doesn't matter. You have everything you need now. But you have to also understand there's always going to be some sort of separation between God and you. You're here on earth. He's not. Maybe he is somehow, but he's not walking around. You ain't inviting him over to dinner. You're not going to play golf with him this weekend. That's what people like. They want the interaction. They want to talk to people. They want to touch other people. But that's not how God is. God is secret. Everything about the kingdom is secret. That's why it can exist here now, and you couldn't even know, you wouldn't even know about it. Most people don't. But Jesus says it was. That's where faith comes in. That's the whole point of this video. If you read the Bible, and Jesus said it was going to happen, most people say, well, it must be a mistake. He's going to come in the future. That's an excuse. Those people are not disciples of Christ. A disciple of Christ is someone says, I read the Bible, I heard what Jesus said, I prayed on it and prayed on it, and if that's what Jesus said, that's what happened. I don't need proof. No one needs to tell me anything. Jesus said it, and it's undeniable. Then it happened. That's the test. That's why it was left that way. If you look at the rest, again with the Gospels, you need to read the Gospels. What is the main theme? Faith, faith, faith. It's all about faith. Faith has made you well. Your faith has cured you. faith in everything. That's what it's about. When Jesus said, drink my blood, eat my flesh, he wanted to see who was going to go away and stay. That's completely against my religion. But I trust you. When Jesus told the parables of the sowers, what I think Jesus was doing was he was saying, let's see who gets it and let's see who doesn't. Let's see who understands and who doesn't. When he was building his discipleship, he was building not necessarily an army, but a group of people that understood. But it was based on faith. And I know, for myself, it doesn't always make sense. Don't be afraid. You have God. You have that relationship with God, and you're good. I guarantee you, if you really go in there and you pray to him, he knows you, you know him, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it anymore. So don't worry about what version you need. Don't worry about it doesn't make sense. Just have faith in God. Ask him questions. Ask him whatever you want to ask him, and he will answer you. And I guarantee you, when he answers you, it's amazing. It's like, wow. I'm kind of, desensitized to it now. Now it's something I expected. It's like, yeah, if God took a mountain and threw it in the ocean, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm not surprised. What else would I expect? What else would you expect? He is there. And when that happens, it builds even more faith. And more faith leads to more prayer. And then he answers you, and that gets your faith up even more. And then you don't need someone to come up to you and say, "Oh, Jesus loves you so much," because you already know that. It's not external anymore. It's taken home inside of you. It dwells inside of you. That's why in Luke 17:21, so many people hate that verse. It's satanic. If you think about it, the way people react to that verse, they blame it on anything. The Pharisees, the kingdom of heaven is inside of you. That's where it dwells. And it's here now. But those people don't want you to believe it because they are not disciples of Christ. They may think they are. They may call themselves that. But if they don't believe in Jesus and what he said, do you really think Jesus is going to accept you? That's the whole test. Again, he said something. Are you going to believe him or not? And a lot of these people, going back to amillennialism, is they learn things through the church. They learn things through systems like amillennialism, preterism, dispensationalism, and they rely on them to tell them everything. Amillennialism became their God and their teacher. Not God himself, the Father in heaven. They rely on other people. When they pray at him. Oh, Jesus, oh God, we're going to tell the truth. We want to know your spirit. We want to know your truth. And they don't get burned up by a lightning. So it must be true, right? I could do that. I'm not going to, but I could. I wouldn't get hit by lightning. It doesn't really mean anything. It's all fake. It's an alternate universe that they live in. Live in God's kingdom with God all the time. And then you can go to church. Then you can read those books. I don't, but you can, and you can still enjoy them because now you know what's right and wrong for yourself. But you have to understand, God and the kingdom of God is for disciples. And that's it. It's not for It's not for these politicians to say, oh yeah, I'm a Catholic. Oh, I'm a Protestant. Vote for me. And then you see them the next day and they're somewhere else with a banner that says reverse Roe. And people still vote for them. Even now, the country is 70% Christian? And yeah, people like, well, any of them really, they're all bad. But the one we got now is really bad. How could you call yourself a disciple of Christ when you vote for someone like that? It's because you don't know any better. It's because you've been brainwashed. You don't know what reality is because you live in an alternate reality. It's been taken away from you. Everything's been taken away from you. And they do it on purpose to keep you away from salvation. And not only that, but your life is horrible and miserable. And you have to depend on them and their promises in the hopes that it won't be so miserable. But it's not going to solve anything. You can make all the money you want. It's not going to solve anything. You can get everything you want. Career, house, doesn't matter. Doesn't do anything. It's only temporary. It's only temporary. It doesn't mean anything. And it's not everlasting. You can't take it with you. But they want to keep you away from God. They keep you hypnotized. They keep you in the dark. And that's your reality. It's horrible. I know. I wasn't really a part of the whole church scene, but I could see it. I could see it in my friends. The kingdom of heaven, according to Christ, is here now. It's not just a theory. It is a theory of mine that I put out, but all I did was read the Bible. I didn't change anything. I could read any version I wanted and prove the same point. And they want to keep you away from knowing that because they want you to doubt. They want you to doubt Christ's words. And let's just face it, most people are lazy and they don't read the Bible. They just go in, fill up, get high on Jesus and go about their business. Do you think that's going to work? You think you're going to go to heaven? You think God wants you? Maybe he does. I don't know what the cutoff point is. But for someone who loves you as much as that, for you to repay them in that manner, I would be insulted. Do you think God will be insulted? It's so easy. It's so easy to pray, and it's so easy to read. You can read, can't you? Everyone can now. There's no excuse. Ask for guidance, and you'll get it. But when you do pray, do it in private. Have your own relationship. Tell him everything. Don't hide anything. It's Father in heaven. Jesus is dead. Jesus never said, pray to me. Pray to God. Father in heaven. And don't do some hallowed be thy name. That was just an example. Pray to him. Go in the bathroom, lock the door, turn on the fan. You don't need a picture of the Pope in front of you or some rosary or light candles. Just talk to him. Ask him anything you want, like a therapist. And you can say anything. And he'll answer you. You have to have that relationship. If you don't, he won't know you. You will die and he said, I never knew you. Or when you did pray, you just prayed at me. Oh God, I'm such a great guy and you're a great guy. We're both great guys. Amen. What is that? You think you're going to learn anything from talking like that? You're doing yourself a disfavor, a disservice by doing that. But again, that's how you've been taught. You are a victim, but at some point, especially if you manage to watch this video, you have become a perpetrator. And you have to either stick your head in the ground or change. The meaning of life is salvation. Salvation isn't going to heaven. Salvation is turning away from your natural self. You were born a certain way, you were brought up a certain way, you were brainwashed, you were taught to think things. But you see light. You see it. You look, oh, what's that? There's something there. That's God. And then you turn more and you turn more and you start to change. And once you turn, you don't turn back because you don't want to. But at some point you turn enough where God comes down from heaven, just like it's described in Revelation, and puts his tabernacle over you. And he dwells inside of you. He lives with you. He surrounds you. It is the most relieving thing you could ever imagine. Nothing changes on the outside. But everything's different. Everything. There is no more pain. There is no more suffering. You are not part of the world anymore. You are now his. You are now in the book of life. It took me almost 15 years to figure this out. I was always being protected in a way, watched over, but I couldn't enter the kingdom of heaven. And I look back, I can't tell you on what day God accepted me. It wasn't the day I got baptized. It wasn't the day I went to a church, and I didn't actually do it, but some people go to churches and they, I don't know, altar call or something like that, whatever it was. That's not it. It's sneaky. It came in. I don't know when, but when I look back, it's there. It's the here now. But I don't know when. Luke 17:21. You won't see it. The kingdom of heaven is inside of you. And that's where it is. That's where it resides. For the people who become disciples of Christ. This new heavens and new earth, according to Christ, happened like he said it was. It is here now. And you've been kept from it. Take the time to pray to God sincerely on your own. And if you're doing it now, do it more. If you're lost now, keep praying and just listen. And when he answers you, it's the greatest thing on earth. I can't tell you how relieved, just like the Bible, relieved I am just from praying. I don't even work anymore. I'm retired. All I do is study. I didn't do that. I could really get into it. Everything's changed. Because I've been taken out of the world. I'm not saying everyone's going to retire, but for me, that's what he wanted. Maybe even to create these videos. I really don't know what it's for. And it doesn't matter. And that's what you'll find in the Bible. The Bible bears witness to what's happening to you. It bears witness to that. When you start to change and you read the Gospels and what he's saying, you'll understand. You'll be able to relate to it. A lot of people have already said this video, it's impossible. The kingdom of heaven can't be here because they have some other idea of what is going to happen, just like the Jews did. But they're mistaken because they were told something else. Instead of reading themselves, they just say, oh, that's not true. And they go about their business. But it is here, and they can't see it. The Bible bears witness to what is happening inside of you. And if you pray, and this is almost like a DIY or advice to you. I did it. I'm not perfect. I'm a hypocrite. Ask anyone that knows me. The only thing that's different is I have a relationship with God because I believe in him, because I love him, because he loves me. And I could see it. He answers prayers. It's amazing. And that's what the Bible is. It's amazing. It's relief. It's relief from the toils of this world. When I read Revelation, I can identify with that chapter in 21. Other people can't. Other people look at say, well, there's a war going on. Okay. I know it's hard to wrap your head around until it's not. And when it's not, and you can identify and you read it, you're like, I understand. I get that. You may read it in a word in the Bible, and it's kind of confusing. But then you look in the Greek, and you look at what the word really means, and you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense now. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. It's been happening for almost 2+ years now. So you're finding little booby traps, but it just doesn't seem right. The Bible makes perfect sense, but you have to go through the motions. Pray to God, and you'll find everything I'm saying is accurate. The kingdom of heaven is here now. It's all around you. It's around me right now. Everything's the same, but everything is different. And I'll never go back. Ever. I hope this helped.